Welcome back, everybody, to the Legacy Innovators podcast. Today we have Joseph Fischer, CEO and founder of Playmaker Recruiting. Joseph, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Kobe. I'm excited to be here, talk about what we have to offer, and also talk about so much of what we see out there in the recruiting space.
Yep, for sure. Well, okay, just getting started then, can you kind of share the story behind Playmaker Recruiting and kind of what inspired you to create it?
Yeah, so really what it comes down to is me seeing everything my siblings, my friends, myself went through, trying to get attention at a school that didn't have a couple of great years in there.
Sure.
Definitely had us our struggles with a really tough district in North Austin between your powerhouses of places like Lake Travis, which had Baker on it at the time, which of course now being at the professional level, we see why he is who he
Right.
is, and so many others. Just a really tough schedule, and when that happens, so few people come by campus. They assume that there's no one there for them to look at,
Right.
and it just slows down. And when you have a coach who is as good as he was, and how much, especially on defense, as he wasn't necessarily the most gregarious individual. And
Sure.
so if he doesn't have those contacts, you're out kind of in the wide ocean
Right.
trying to get attention. And this is, I'm going to show my age a little bit, but before really Twitter was even as much of a tool as it is
Yeah.
now.
Yep.
And Huddle was around, but it's not nearly as sophisticated. And so you're just doing your best to put together this information, trying to figure out how best to put it in front of people. And then the tremendous costs that come into these
Yep.
recruiting services. If
Yep.
you're playing also like my siblings did, playing club sports where you're in a select team and you're doing travel, the cost grows
Yeah.
exponentially.
The
And so many
fees.
people with talent get left out of that system, and they can't afford to go do that, or they're so talented that they get that scholarship, but now you're only picking up that really top percent. And how
Sure.
do you make sure everyone else still has access to that opportunity? And
Right.
that's really what inspired Playmaker, and us understanding that really everyone wants to be able to sit down and have that conversation. The coach wants to connect with the recruiter and tell them about how they are in the locker room. The player
Mhm.
wants to be able to say, hey, here's everything that I have done, and know that it got looked at. And the
Sure.
recruiter doesn't want to just be endlessly searching through a list with no
Right.
direction as much as anyone else.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
limited time. And so how do we all finally come to the table, and instead of passing like ships in the night, meet and really have those effective conversations and give access to opportunity? And so that's what inspired it. And then we kind of went from there as we built our two different tool sets out. And
Yeah.
it's been a wild ride. We kind of started things in January 2020, and COVID
Okay.
happens. And so, it was like, all right, well, we had an
Yeah.
idea and everything. We're not even sure there's seasons right now,
Right.
and ended up being a blessing in disguise, where we could sit down with a lot of coaches who over the summer couldn't meet. They were just stuck at home. They were happy to talk about ball all day because they couldn't, there was no
Couldn't
work
do
to be
anything
had.
else. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it was an awesome opportunity, and actually opened up a lot of doors for us as we then really honed what tools were going to save coaches time, and what tools were really going to bring that opportunity to the people that deserved it and should have the access to it. And so that's really where it started, and now where we're at.
Awesome. Awesome. And how would you describe sort of your mission and values to someone that may be unfamiliar with your company?
Yeah, our mission is ensuring that all that data that you have out there, whether it's from your social media, from your Huddle or other platform, or it might be YouTube if you cut something up
Sure.
yourself, and all of your performance stats are all brought in one place so that you can have your best chance of, when you get that look,
Yeah.
making the fullest impression. Because every second a recruiter has to look and go
Yeah.
start digging, the more likely it is, unless you've really impressed them, that you
They're
fall
gonna
off.
click off and go to the next one. Yep.
Exactly. And it shouldn't matter where you play, where you're born, the access, the personal resources you have.
Sure.
It should be about the hard work you've done in the weight room,
Of course.
the relationships you've developed, and the performances you've had. And that's really our mission and our values. And we stick to that. And we, kind of back that up with also how we structure pricing, which is a player's never paying us. We
Okay.
never want to put them in the position where they're having to figure out how to do that.
Right.
Compared to so many others, we never do that. We never charge their
Yeah.
families. That's
That's
never
that's
part of our, yeah.
That's amazing, especially because, being a former athlete myself, you athletes are already stressing about how they're performing on the court or on the field, wherever, and they're stressing about how they're performing off of where they're playing sports as well in the classroom, anything they may have going on in life. So having to pay for a service to then try and, get yourself out there just adds to another level of stress. So I love that you guys aren't doing that with Playmaker Recruiting. Um, I guess my next question was going to be, what makes your approach different from other platforms in the recruiting space? And obviously, that right there is one approach for sure.
Yeah, that's one part. And I think it makes people look at us a little differently because
Yeah,
when we've been in these conversations with rooms with people who have dealt with or invested in companies
sure.
that go after family spending, they look at us and they're like, well, but why wouldn't you want a piece of that pie? It's like that. It's
Right.
not just about that. It's
Yeah.
about making sure people have access to that opportunity. So that's a big part of our difference. The
Okay.
other is we do a lot of that aggregation and plug into a lot of the tools that different high school coaches are already using so
Gotcha.
that we're not just asking them to do more work. There's a
Yeah.
lot of platforms out there that are just a recruiting platform or just a prospect list manager. And every time that they need something updated, it's a separate task. It's a
Okay.
new thing they have to do. We integrate with so many things so that they don't have to worry about that. If they just had a game this past Friday, by Saturday morning when they've done everything in huddle, it's already synced. There's no extra work. Their strength and conditioning coaches now have a place they can already store and track the strength and conditioning instead of the extra work that they're already doing. And now we're giving them tools instead of it being here's just a recruiting service.
Right.
So we're bridging this gap between a team tool and this recruiting database. And then we also set ourselves apart a lot for college programs. And the big thing we
Okay.
do there is showing that context, which we talk about, that difficulty of schedule. I
Yeah.
was on a program, we played a murderer's row. It was tough. And the offense, our defense would hold out first half. It's a low
Yep.
scoring game, but if you don't put up points on the board,
Yep. You're not gonna
eventually it
win.
catches up with you.
Yep.
We weren't the 2000 Ravens where we could win, 7-3, if only, but it's a
Yeah.
tough ask sometimes. And
For
so the
sure.
question is, how do we show that context? How do I show the contribution of that player to their team? Are they that tackle leader? Oh,
Right.
this linebacker has 30% of the tackles on his team.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's flying all over the place. They may be a 3-7 team, but maybe
And
we
that
should
doesn't show
take
up
a
on the
look.
stat sheet. There's a lot of stats, I mean, again, across all sports that don't show up on the stat sheet. And I think,
Exactly.
unfortunately, there's a lot of recruiters and coaches out there that recruit solely based off of stat sheet and the flashy stuff that they're seeing instead of taking the time to actually go and, study the film and look at the little things that kids are doing.
And if we
Um,
can show that and we can say, hey, look at these other metrics, and then they watch that film. Because at the end of
yeah,
the day, the film is going to tell you a lot,
yeah,
especially on the plays that maybe they didn't record something that,
yeah,
you get knocked over. How quickly does it get back up and pursue?
sure.
Or how quickly does, okay, there's a turnover, he's makes a bad pass.
Yeah,
There's a turnover. Is he running to try and tackle
yeah.
that
Is he
guy, or does
attempting
he
to
just
tackle him or yeah, yep,
does he get upset? And that
sure.
tells you a lot about what some in inside baseball lingo would be
Yeah,
kind of that football character or that athlete character, which is something didn't go your way. How are you bouncing back? What does that look
yeah,
like? We also and we do some other things about showing not just someone's size, right? But
okay,
what is their athleticism relative to size? Somebody who's 250 is not going to run a 100-meter dash the same
sure.
way someone at 150 is, but
How
how
are
does
they
that
running compared to other people?
to others? And
Yeah,
how do you
yeah,
help an offensive lineman who doesn't, most programs are not saying how many pancakes they got. And if they
right.
do, that's the O line coach who's
Yeah,
recording that
yep,
only, and he's got it up on a
yeah,
board. But how do you show, hey, how many sacks or how efficient is their run game? That's a sign of the offensive line. It's not just the running back. And that's going to bring eyes to these units that don't always have those measurables. And so that's where we set ourselves apart and feel like we really help college programs get really good at spending their time watching film efficiently, because they're not just in a going out open and opening their Twitter DMs and just
Right.
watching one after the other. And as much
Right.
as that's good and a player should be, getting themselves out
Yeah.
there, how much of that is also going to be based on
Repetitive for these coaches that, they're receiving the same sort of messages and DMs every day. You have to find a way to make yourself stand out. For sure.
exactly. And if
Yeah.
you have that whole package there, when they click in, they're going to have this context. And if they call your coach, whose information is also right there,
Right.
they can ask, hey, I saw this one game. He had a tough time. It didn't look like he stood out. He had 3 turnovers. What happened?
Yeah.
And they can get really good conversations with that first touch with the coach instead of asking, what can you tell me about this kid? And
Sure.
now you're hoping your coach is like prepared and ready versus sitting there and trying to think of things. And it's a lot more personal, and it
Sure.
becomes a lot more of a real conversation than it is just, who do you got for me this year?
For
Because
sure.
there's some guys that do that.
Yep.
That call up the usual suspects. They're
Yep.
calling DeSoto or North Crowley these days, and then you're like, who do you have? Who should I be talking to? What do their parents do? And what's his Twitter so I can DM him?
Right.
It's all different, and we're trying to make it to where it's a lot more. It is about, in athletics, it should be a meritocracy. And how do we get a little more back to that and take the money and flash out of it and get back to what really matters? Because we've seen it time and time again, these unflashy picks, these guys who go into college and they transfer and people feel like, where did this guy come
Where'd it
from?
come from? Yep.
Somebody messed up,
He was
someone
there all
along that
along.
chain.
Yep. He just didn't have anyone to take a shot on him.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
how do we make sure that they feel confident taking that shot,
Right.
especially now that there's money on the line, there's new limits on rosters across every sport in college? How do you make it to where they can feel confident? Yeah, he's not some 5-star on 247, but this guy is playing like he's a 5-star. He just doesn't have the right connections and
Sure.
making that difference. And of course, they get that offer from a big program. All of a sudden, maybe he is a 5-star.
Right.
That helps too. So
Exactly. Yep. Um, what are some of the biggest struggles you hear from high school coaches or athletes when it comes to getting noticed by college programs?
great question. And I think it varies by size. The
Okay.
really big programs, your Lake Travises or your Westlakes, they usually have more coaching staff. So they have a dedicated recruiting coordinator and probably an assistant to
Yep.
him. So the players have different issues. They're frustrated that they can't figure out what's going on or what conversations have been had.
Right.
They feel like they don't have the transparency that they want, and they feel that as much as they're a part of it, their parents are also wondering what's going on, and
Yeah.
without that transparency or knowing what's happening, it can get very frustrating
We
and
have a
defeating.
disconnect. Yeah.
Yeah, and you feel like, oh, I'm not getting anywhere. It's like, no, you are, but they can't talk to you yet.
Sure.
Or, hey, you just have to there are things you need to work on and just focus on that, but they don't necessarily have that feedback because their coach may have not talked to them directly. Or, you're in the next class and they're just looking at your seniors because they're trying to figure out who they're going to make that final offer to.
Sure.
On the other side, smaller schools, they're also cutting up their own highlight films. Some of the other programs, the big ones, the coaches are doing it for them. And some of those coaches are ex-college personnel people. So they know exactly what to cut up because they've been on that other side of the equation.
Sure.
For the smaller school, the kid's trying to do it themselves,
Yeah.
and the coach is then coming in later reviewing it, and they may give them some back. But how much is that coach spending time? It's like, well, am I going to lose my job over this? Where am I going to put my time? And
Right.
making that difference, and them just being far more adrift. And that's why those tools, really bringing it together, and that transparency came really across. And the other for small schools is that, how do I bring someone to our school to visit our guys? How do I have that conversation with them? How do I know what I've got opened
Sure.
for programs that I don't have a connection with. There are some programs that have had guys move up to the next level, and so they feel good about that. Others, if you're outside of Austin, you're in Lockhart, you're in Lampasas, the further outside of a major metro you are, the harder it is to get someone to stop by. And so, how do you make sure your people aren't being left out and kind of doing what you can with even more limited resources? You have a bigger hill to climb with less resources. How do you make that work? And
Sure.
those are sometimes the most creative coaches and the hardest workers because they have that much more of an uphill battle. And so giving them those tools that give them time back means that they have time to support their players that much more. So I've heard a lot of struggles and a lot of frustration from players who,
I'm sure.
oh, I'm DMing everybody, I'm
Yeah.
posting every day, and now I got to go to this camp, and they got these recordings, but they only sent me one copy. How do I get that together? It's tough, and
Yeah.
it's also hard trying to know who's real out there.
Yeah. And
There's a
that
lot
can
of
feel
agents.
that can feel
Yeah,
crushing. I mean, kids feeling like they've done everything that they can and put in all this work and not seeing any results from it. That
exactly.
takes a toll on you over time.
And
Sure.
how do you, especially, I mean, you're young, you're
Yeah.
16, 17, 18.
Yeah.
It's hard to realize there's going to be a lot of no's out there. You're going to hear
Yeah.
just a lot of nothing. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean what you're doing isn't working, but sometimes just that lightning strike hasn't hit yet.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're having to manufacture your own luck. And that's a tough thing to ask a kid who's being
Yeah.
pulled in a million directions. He's got classes during the day, he's got practice in the morning and evening, then he's got games on the weekends. He's icing, then he gets home and he's trying to not heal up and get everything right for the next week and the project he's got due and everything else. It's hard enough. Plus, to add all of that extra work, it can be really tough to ask
Yeah.
someone to do that, especially when they don't have a support system around them. And
Right.
that's where we really try and come in and help give that more passive way to say, I put everything together, I can send this out really easily, and I'm not having to go do all this extra work. It's ready to go. And that's where we really try to help people, come out of
Yeah.
the darkness a little bit
For
and
sure.
get some of that attention.
Yeah. No, I think yeah, that's awesome. And I think that one thing that helped me, I think, throughout my recruitment journey, more so because I took the junior college route, so I didn't I graduated during COVID, so like we touched on earlier, I mean, COVID made everything, kind of difficult for everybody. And I think one thing that helped me when I was um putting in all the work and just waiting for that school to come around to take a shot at me was at the end of the day, you can only go to one school. So all it takes is one coaching staff to believe in you and find you. You may have 500 no's and 1,000 no responses, but all it takes is that one school to take a shot on you. So um
Exactly. It takes one, and
yeah,
oftentimes one begets another,
yeah,
ironically enough.
exactly.
So, and then you have, and it can be demoralizing. You look, and there's some five-star recruit, posted in a bathtub, like with the offers piled up all
Yep.
over him, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Why? I played that guy 2 weeks ago, and I
Yep.
feel like I outplayed him. What am
Yeah.
I not doing right? But so much of that has more to do with just the media landscape and the systems at play, and not the sport and not what you're doing day in day out, and trying to make it to where someone, like a Cam Ward, is not having to bounce three different levels to get
Yeah.
that shot. How do you make sure that person is still gets lifted in a shot to get seen?
Right.
Because if we believe that a big program has more resources, is going to develop someone better, if we believe that, maybe not always true,
Sure.
but then these people are being left, those athletes are being left behind and getting less of a positive trajectory that may take them who knows where. And for every Cam Ward, there's probably 100 others that didn't get that shot. And how do you
Yeah.
make that really stand out?
Yeah. Sure. Can you talk about how Playmaker helps coaches kind of manage their workload during the busy season?
Yeah. Our what we call our GM tools in that case
Yeah.
really helps them manage their different data streams, and we do a lot to sync it. So one thing we do is, and I'm going to use Huddle as the example here because
Okay.
they're a major player in the space, but there are other tools out there that the same function works with, which is to say, hey, I just finished this tagging everything, or I got it back from Huddle Assist, and now I've shared my film with my opponent for next week. I'm tagging things to break down totals and our own self scouting. And in doing so, I've added this other data, but now I don't want to have to come over and re enter in another score sheet all these
Everything
totals.
manually. Yeah.
We are able to say, hey, all you got to do is take this data, hit this button right over here, and we're going to pull it over. And now the player's data is there, your data is there, stuff for your own self scouting, stuff for your opponent scouting if you want to run totals that way.
Yeah.
So that instead of on a Saturday and Sunday, them, they have that one guy who's the Excel kid
Yep.
that is in there breaking everything down.
Yep.
It's done much faster. Everyone has
Okay.
immediate access to it. And then by saving all that time, maybe they can do a little more film review,
Yep.
or they're spending less time on Monday doing additional breakdown and doing more with their players and saying, hey, here's what we've seen, here's what's coming up. And now you're educating the players even more about the sport. That's huge. And we're really proud of that. And then we're proud of our strength and conditioning, which is really a tool that's often left as an afterthought, like the strength and
Yeah.
conditioning coaches, wherever they put it, or if it's up on a whiteboard in the weight room,
Yep.
they still have those recordings and they're running preseason, postseason totals, all of that, tracking it over time, finding ways to for the player to understand what their goal is. Having those built in as well also helps capture those important metrics that a lot of colleges want to see. They want to know what their bench max is or rep totals are at 225, or they want a 40-yard dash or a 100-meter. And so bringing all that together is huge. And then the player can contribute. So it's not all on the coach. So it
Okay.
also means that it's not just their responsibility, and players, should take ownership of that recruiting journey so they
Right.
can fill out things like a questionnaire, which adds a lot of personal information and context for really important engagements when you talk about like a D3 school that can't offer a athletic scholarship but may have an
Scholarship.
academic one. And so all of those things become really important. And instead of a player having to go to every single small school all over the
Yep.
country and fill out their questionnaire on their website,
Yep.
they have one ready to go that's 99% the same information they all ask,
That's
and
awesome.
that's ready to go. And any other information they add, the coach can review and double check everything's there. They're not going anywhere else, but the player's contributing. So it's not just on the coach either. And it really makes it to where everyone's working together for the same goal and within the same environment. And the coach can review and say, hey, I saw in your questionnaire you said you're 6'6". Come on now. Don't what are we talking about here?
Yeah, I need to
Don't
see
be
you in
massaging any
person. Yep.
numbers. Yeah. And so there's oversight there. And then they both have that view on when it got looked at. So that means the
Okay.
player knows, oh, these guys at Texas Tech looked at
Right.
me. Maybe I
Okay.
should DM them. And the
Cool.
coach sees it. So when the parent comes in and says, hey, what are you doing for my kid? He's like, hey, I got the receipts. We're doing everything we
Yep.
can. We've sent that email, and everyone feels like they're working together, and there's no finger pointing on, well, what I'm doing isn't working. What are you doing? And what are you
Yeah.
doing? And
Sure.
so everyone's actually on the same page. And that's where we find we can give them a lot of time back because they're not worrying about following up like, hey, did you open this? Hey, what's
Yeah.
going on? They know if they did. And so
Yep.
now their next follow up is only the people who didn't. And
Cool.
that's really that what separates us, I feel like.
Cool. Cool. And with obviously with trends like NIL and college realignment, how do you see recruiting sort of evolving over the next few years? And are there any challenges you've noticed recently?
Yes. And it varies by level. I believe what used to be Power Five, which is really, I guess you could say Power Three
Sure.
now, Power Four,
Yep.
depending on your feelings on the ACC, I guess, or the
Yep.
Big 12.
Yep.
Um, those programs are really leaning heavily into transfers, especially for certain key positions where they feel like they need a quick injection of talent. Maybe they don't trust their young starters yet, or feel like if they recruited this person that they had a lot of hype and isn't who they thought they would be, and
Sure.
now they got to go fill in that position. We're already seeing that. And I think everyone across the country sees, well, wait, Carson Beck was just at Georgia last year. Why is he at Miami? What's going on? And
Yeah.
that's where the NIL comes in, which is between that level. Now it's about money and who is going to be able to pay to bring in those premium talents.
Yep.
Hopefully, the revenue share helps stabilize some of the middle of that roster, the guys that are backups that are still going to get something and don't have to leave for a NIL deal
Sure.
and have something coming in, and ideally still leave college, even from a group of 5 program, leave with something, a bit of a nest egg to start whatever is next for them. But it's really going heavy into transfers. And that's also coming from junior colleges. I mean, Vandy has really turned around by pulling a lot of junior college guys or junior college guys that went to a different kind of program that then came in.
Yep.
And so how do you, with the eligibility rules now, those people, that's not counted against them. So you have people sticking around in the system longer. So we're seeing high school recruiting getting pushed further and further down the priority list. And so it's harder to stand out. And it's almost that much more important to make sure you're getting in front of everyone who isn't your Alabama or your Texas, that isn't just a big brand, because they're only taking somebody who's essentially a consensus 5-star or 4-star kid. It's rarer that they're taking a chance because they don't have the roster space for it. And so now we're seeing the smaller programs having to recruit high school at a like D1 level without the resources of a D1 program. So how do they cover these massive geographic areas to feed this machine, which is throwing money at everyone they can? If you have a flash, the money is coming. And how do they make sure that their rosters don't just get completely emptied by that next level? And it's a tough thing. I think we'll see a balance restore.
Okay.
Some of the best programs in the sport right now are, and this also goes for basketball. We're seeing it in baseball some, though baseball's been has had
Baseball
some
is weird because you have, and I noticed it firsthand because obviously I played 2 years in junior college, and we had a baseball team at my school, and they were actually like our junior college was really a baseball school. Like that was the main program there. The majority of the money went into the baseball program, and you had guys that were transferring from schools like Ohio State, big name schools, and in basketball that's uncommon because usually
Mhm.
people are trying to get from junior college to those big name schools and then on to the league or whatever overseas. And with baseball, guys are able to go straight from junior college to the MLB. There's so many different routes in baseball. It kind of gets like it's a little different
It's a
compared to that.
much less of a straight line, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the way their draft works is so different, and the
yeah,
feeder systems,
yeah.
which the NBA doesn't really have the
Nope,
same as, and the
nope.
NFL certainly doesn't. The
Yeah,
college sports is their feeder,
yep,
which is why you see it almost being restructured with these big D1 programs, like their AA, AAA teams
sure.
for these other big programs and big professional levels, where they're almost expecting like, hey, develop them, get them ready. If they're really good, we'll take them as soon as they can. You get a
Yep,
lot of that too. Same in basketball. So I think we'll see a balance though, because if we look at someone, and I'm going to use Ohio State as an example here,
okay.
as much as they've always been really good,
Yeah,
but an overwhelming majority of the people they have on their team, when you look at their receivers, they're not transfers. They brought them in as freshmen, they developed them, they do really well of retaining players. Same thing with a lot of these across their defense, same thing. Quarterback, they've occasionally, they went and got Will Howard from Kansas State when they felt
yep,
like they weren't ready there, but they had every other position. So they tend to be a lot more high school focused.
sure.
And I think we're going to see a shift where programs that are most successful, they're going to bring in some transfers, but to sustain that success, you have to bring in depth and you have to bring in quality high school players that you're going to develop that are ready to take over at that next step. Otherwise, you are constantly chasing the transfer,
Yep,
And
You're gonna fall behind.
the the class is always a little different.
Yeah,
You never know who is going to be that standout each year. The draft is kind of the same way. You have good classes for different positions. You're going to have the same thing, and you can't count on someone leaving just because you throw the most money at them.
sure.
And I think the rules are going to shift there. There is no such thing as tampering in the sport right now.
Right.
We will see if that ever really gets enforced. They keep getting NCAA keeps getting sued and said, "Hey, you can't
Yeah.
tell us that you can't negotiate." Which
Yeah.
I think revenue share will be multi-year contracts, which will sort of lock someone in or have
Sure.
penalties. But NIL can't be for play, which is
Yeah.
why those have always been a bit of a wide open kind of gray area that has worked there.
Yeah. And I
Hopefully
think,
we reach something, a bit of a middle ground. But I
yeah,
see high school recruiting returning. It's usually the newest coaches that bring in a ton of transfers. Dion did this, right? And rebuilt a team and then really tries to go heavy into high school with some
exactly.
transfers to try and build that base up and that base talent, because that's how you become a juggernaut. It's
Yeah.
not by being the place where transfers always go, it's
Right.
by also really developing talent and attracting high school players in that
Right.
top echelon, and developing them, because you can
Yeah.
bring in a really talented kid. If they don't develop, it doesn't matter. They're
Well,
going
that
to get passed up.
and I mean, these schools can go out and essentially buy, all the top players and stuff that they want. However, that doesn't mean that the chemistry is going to be, off the charts. You
And
have
it's a locker room.
and with bringing in, say, you get a bunch of five-star transfers into one team, that's a lot of egos to deal with. That's it. It's a lot more than just we're gonna go and get the talent. Team chemistry plays a big factor. I think that a lot of people don't really realize, because you could have all the talent in the world, but if those guys aren't getting along in the locker room, it's not gonna last very long.
And
So,
that you hit it perfectly, which is every year, if you bring in transfers every year,
yeah,
it's a whole new environment. What is your
yeah.
team's
What's your
identity
team
then?
culture? Yeah,
Yeah, every year it's
yeah,
a new set. You don't have leaders in
yeah,
there setting the tone for the
yeah.
younger players.
You don't have a
And every
senior that
year,
stayed there, that's been there since their freshman year and worked their way up and saw the changes throughout every season. You don't have that
yeah.
anymore.
And are you going to have a transfer who just came in set the tone of what it means to
Yeah,
be, at Ohio State? And or
yeah,
who is going to be that vocal person who's carrying the torch? If he knows he just came in this year and is probably hopping in the portal next year, he's just going to be in there doing his job, focusing
yeah,
on him, doing what he needs to do to try and build his brand,
yeah,
which is unfortunately what a lot of
exactly.
these players are being told. It's like, it's about your brand, even in high
Yeah,
school. It's like, your brand is great, it'll get you some attention, but it's not going to get you a contract.
yeah,
It's not going to win the game, and it's going to mean you're going to bounce back if you spend all this time focused on that instead of what got you to
exactly.
this brand. And that's really where I feel like there's a lot of bad advice out there. There's a lot of people who are building, agencies and trying to represent these people, and their job is to get you the biggest deal no matter what, because they get a piece of it. And that's great until you really ask yourself, where do I want to be, that I can be there for the longest period of time, that's going to develop me, that I feel like is going to be also a great fit culturally for what they do versus what my skill set is. It's just so different than, oh, it's a big brand, they're paying a lot of money, I guess I'll go there for a year, and if it doesn't work out, I'm going to transfer again. The more you transfer, the less likely it is you're going to get buried, because every time you go into that portal, you're now recompeting with everyone. And there's
Yeah,
some people that have been playing 6 years in the portal, and then there's some
yeah,
people that are all freshmen. And
yeah,
how are you going to compete? Maybe it's your second year. You're now re-recruiting. You're going through the
yeah,
recruiting process all over again
yeah.
in an even more difficult scenario.
It's exhausting.
And so it's tough. I really sympathize with how difficult this process has become,
Yeah,
despite all the technology, despite the fact that, social media makes it easier to get in touch with people,
yeah,
but it's also just creates so much noise. How do you break through it? And how do you get to the authentic person and player behind it? not just the flash. And that's really where we try and separate ourselves. Say, let's put all that aside. Here's what's really going on. Here's the context. Now it's time for a conversation and watch that film and go from there.
Sure. And would you say, with all these rapid changes in recruiting that are happening, would you say that they've made sort of a data management or talent identification? Has it made those things more challenging for your clients?
Yes and no. I will say the good thing is if they hear somebody's name,
Yeah.
there are tools out there that some of which are very specific to certain types of measurables
Okay.
where they can try and track them down. And now they can just DM somebody really quickly. The
Okay.
hard part is how do you decide how many of those you're going to do?
Right.
And how do you know that that time you're about to spend is worth it? It's based on
Yeah.
a relationship they have. And if
Okay.
they're a coach without as many relationships, it's harder to know when you're getting that email from a coach in another state that you don't
Right.
know as well
Yeah.
if you're going to spend your time on that. And they
Okay.
do their best to try and look at everything. It's just too many people.
Yeah.
And it's almost harder. It used to be there's one place I got to look for players, and their coach is going to send me stuff, and then I'm going to go and scout areas that are my job.
Okay.
Now it's a lot more fragmented, and there are tools out there, but they don't bring everything together. And that's where, with our clients, we find we do a lot to help, which is I'm not having to go to 6 different places to build this full picture of a player. It's all
Sure.
right here. And I'm one click away from their film. I'm one click away from their Twitter. And I'm one click away from their coach's phone number and email so that if I have a question, I can follow it very easily. And that's where I feel like we've separated ourselves from other things where we're a lot more complete of a breakdown for them.
Okay. Cool. Well, sort of leaving you with one last question here, and then we can sort of talk briefly after. Looking ahead, what excites you the most about the future of recruiting technology and college athletics as a whole?
I think that we've seen this huge disruption with all the rule changes. And I
Sure.
think now we're going to start to see the wheat separate from the chaff a little bit on what is substance
Okay.
and really start to see improvements. And we hope we're part of leading that, obviously. But I think it's also people have realized how much it broke when these
Yeah.
rule changes happened. And we're now starting to finally get a little more defined set of operational, standards for
Sure.
everyone. And I think that's going to be good for players. I think it's
Okay.
going to mean high school recruiting comes back a little more into that highest level. And I think we're going to see, hopefully, a lot of technology in the space where high school tools and things like that we've built with our general manager and things we're adding
Yeah.
can do more automatically. AI with video has
Yeah.
come a long way. And I think that's an exciting technology and just helping them break down and tag things faster.
Okay.
That being said, that's a tool that is still in its nascency with some
Yep.
things. But I think that can help a player also understand a little more. And the camera technology at the high school level is really coming along.
Getting
It
better.
used to be, it was a little hit or miss and the different angles and everything. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen some really grainy film, and
Yeah.
the coaches know who's throwing the ball and running the ball, so they can
Right.
see it. But if
Or
another
just
system,
setting up the little camera up in the scores box that it
you
just
got the
recorded the whole
student
field.
assistant, student manager up there with the shaky arm, and it's like cuts a
Yeah.
little too fast as the kid's running or something.
Yep.
That's how it can sometimes be. It's gotten a lot better, and I
Sure.
think that while there are some of the big companies that have made those cameras and tools,
Yeah.
because other people are getting into the space, that cost is coming down. So
Okay.
it's hopefully providing more access to that for all of these
Yeah.
different programs, which only helps them improve their teaching capabilities to players, also helps them improve, obviously the film that recruiters can view, and provides a little more to a player where if we're providing, other feedback tools and some of that video analytics that we can help them a little more understand things that they might be able to work on or things that they stand out against others in that way. So we're excited to see how that continues to evolve as we continue to also look at new tools to add there, but always trying to keep centered that it's not just data. We know we talk a lot about data, but these are people, these are student athletes. How do we turn this number into context and their story and reflect their journey, not just he's 6'6" and 300 pounds
Yeah.
and he plays offensive line. It's like that's gonna look great,
Right.
and there's gonna be a lot of people that look at that,
Yeah.
but how much else is there about the other people on his team and his performances and everything else, and trying to make sure that there's substance to it, that we get past this flash. And I think people are waking up to kind of trying to move away from just the glitz and the flash. And
Yeah.
hopefully we can see a lot more substance and can be part of that as we try and make sure people aren't left out of the system just because they don't have the money. And I think that we're seeing that adjust. As much as there's a lot of people still asking for money, I think people are
Yeah.
tired of it. I think they're waking up and saying, hey, what are you actually providing us? Are you just saying this because I'm a parent and I want to do the best for my kid and I want them to succeed and I'm willing to pay? And so you're going to take every dollar you can from me?
Yeah.
Or is this something that's really solving the crux of the problem?
Yeah.
And, oh, it's free and I don't have to worry about that.
It's
And the coach is
personalized to
involved.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not just this, oh, I've made a glossy, JPEG or a
Yeah.
PDF.
Right.
And now the recruiter gets it and he's like, wow, this looks really neat. And it's
Yeah.
going to take me forever to get all this information out of this into my database because it's all over the place, because
Right.
they still have all their own internal systems. And how, if it's difficult and they look at the video and it doesn't immediately stick out,
Sure.
how do you stand out, and how do you
Yeah.
make it get past that first 30 seconds of I better either have a crazy good highlight film to make that impression, or for the people that don't have some crazy highlight but are
Yeah.
in the NFL. Fisk is a guy who had a great character, was constantly getting up if he got knocked down. He
Yeah.
played well, but he wasn't someone that jumped out of the film
Right.
that you're like, oh wow, this guy's the next generational talent. But
Sure.
he's absolutely killing it with the Rams. And so how do you
Yeah.
show more of those people, and that hard work is paying off and that character's paying off? So I'm excited to see what's next.
Yeah.
We're
I'm
constantly
I'm
trying to stay ahead of it, but I'm
yeah.
excited.
I'm excited to follow Playmaker Recruiting's journey. I really love what you guys have going on, and it's really personal to me just because I dealt with trying to find the right, recruitment services and stuff, and I went through that whole process from high school, freshman year of high school on to senior year of college.
Mhm.
And there's just a lot of kids out there that need that extra hand, that need that extra help out there that they're not receiving. I love what you guys are doing. And where can the audience and anybody listening find your socials and find out a little bit more about you guys?
Absolutely. I mean, our website, playmakerrecruiting.com, has really the first place to go. Not only see a little bit more about what we do and obviously our mission, see some examples of our tools. You can also always sign up for a demo, or if you're a player, claim a profile there.
Okay.
Obviously, free for everything that we've pre-populated. Our basketball, men's and women's, and baseball, softball tools will be coming out here, in a couple of weeks. So we're going to expand that even more, and then continue to cover, ideally over time, even more sports, so that it's not just the revenue sports, but that everyone still has access to that opportunity. And then you can find us at Playmaker Recruit on X, and then Playmaker Recruiting on Instagram. Always feel free to DM us, add us. If you see this interview, it's like, hey, I saw it, great work. Let us know. That's always cool to
Yeah.
see people that are engaging with us out there telling our story. And if you're a coach, also give us a ring. The information there comes straight to us, and we always love talking with people. And we'll be honest with you about how we fit with what you work with. We want to support people and the processes they have, not just tell them you need to change everything, because
Sure.
there's enough of that, and we
Yeah.
just try to adapt to everyone we work with. So this has been awesome. I really appreciate getting to talk with you, Kobe.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, Joseph. This has been wonderful getting some more insight about Playmaker Recruiting. And like I said, I look forward to following your guys' journey.
Thank you. I'm excited. Hopefully, it'll all be big news soon. So
Yep. Yes,
we'll
sir.
be able to point back to this and be like, oh yeah, that was just before, all
Yeah,
everything
before
really turned
everything
up.
blow up. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I
Awesome.
appreciate you, Joseph, and for taking your time today to join me. And you have a good rest of your day.
You too. I really appreciate it. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
sir. Thank you.